Welcome to Tax Watch, the show of the concerned taxpayers of Duval County. Our website is jaxtaxpayers.org, and we invite your participation in our organization. Dues are $10 monthly, not much. I'm the vice president, and I'm co-hosting with my friend Kristi Dunn today of the Jax Republican Liberty Caucus. And we're looking forward to a real exciting show because our guest is Dr. Charles Perniciaro, candidate for Senate District 8, Florida legislature. And the district includes no less than 5 counties, so it's a big job, and we appreciate what Dr. Charles Perniciaro has been doing. And with that, we'll go straight to our guest and ask you to tell us about yourself and why you're running. Please.
Well, Dave, first off, thanks for having me here as part of this show for the concerned taxpayers. I'm running for the state senate, as you mentioned, in District 8, which is primarily a coastal district. Runs all the way from Nassau down into a little bit of Volusia County. In Duval County, it encompasses our beaches area, extends up into Arlington and the north side. I'm running because I think our leaders are not listening to us anymore. I've become very frustrated with our enormous federal debt, and what we're doing in Florida is balancing our own state budget with stimulus money that's been borrowed from China, and I've just become very frustrated with that. So that's one of the main reasons that I'm running. I think our government is not listening to us anymore, and our leaders are not paying attention.
Wonderful. And Kristi, you have a lot of questions for our candidate, and I'm going to help out and ask some too. Do you want to begin with some questions?
Sure. I think probably the thing that most people are going to wonder the most is what separates you from your opponent. We know that you're running against John Thrasher, and he is obviously a career politician. But besides that, what else would separate you the most from him and what he's done in Tallahassee?
Well, let me expound on that, what you just said, because maybe that's what separates us the most. You know, one of the things I say as we go around the various communities, Kristi, is, you know, politician is probably the one job where the more experience you have, the worse you are at it. And it's really true. I think the longer you're affiliated with the lobbyist and the cozier you get with some of those folks, the more likely you are to make decisions based on those influences and not the wishes of your constituents and the taxpayers. So I think that is one of the large distinctions that separates myself and my opponent. I think that, you know, he's a career politician. He's done this. He's been in the legislature or been a lobbyist for over 20 years, and I think that taints your views, and you're not able to represent the citizens. And I think that's been shown by many examples. I can give you some if we have the time to talk about it, but I think that's one of the main things. The other things, I think my opponent is, you know, he's demonstrated through his record of legislation that, you know, he emphasizes things that are big government, if you will. I believe in limited government. To use as an example, this bill that was, my opponent was the lead author of last year. It was Senate Bill 6. You may remember it. It was about the merit pay for teachers and things like that, all of which are good ideas. But the way that bill was structured was that the decisions for deciding how much teachers would be paid and what types of evaluations would be made for those teachers, all of those things were going to be accomplished from Tallahassee. Right now that's done at the local level. And of course, you know, some of our school districts in this Senate district, St. Johns County, for example, Nassau County, have excellent schools. So when you take away that kind of control and you dictate to those school districts, this is how much you can pay your own employees, see, that's big government. That's big government at its worst. So I think that's a fundamental difference between my opponent and myself. I believe in limited government. I believe in letting the states make decisions as opposed to the federal government. I believe in letting the local governments make decisions as opposed to the state government whenever possible.
So I guess a follow-up to that would be you would not have supported Senate Bill 6 if you had been in the Senate at the time?
That's correct. Not in the context that it was formulated. I mentioned this control from Tallahassee and particularly dictating to the local school districts what they could pay their own employees. But there were a number of things in that bill that were not good. And it could have been amended. It could have been amended to make it a very, very substantial and worthwhile bill. I support teacher accountability. I think teachers support that. They know who the bad teachers are. They know exactly who they are, and they don't want them around either. But what happens is when you decide that, well, we're going to pay our first-year teachers the exact same thing that we pay our 25 and 30-year teachers, even if those teachers have master's degrees or doctorate degrees, are going to get exactly the same pay scale. See, that's wrong. And those things could have been amended as that bill matriculated through the legislature. But what happened was the leadership decided that that was going to go forward without amendment. And even though many of the citizens of the state of Florida, many of the newspapers, most of the newspapers, most of the school superintendents and most of the school boards were against it, there was no amendment, and that bill just charged right forward through and passed. Of course, it was ultimately vetoed by the governor.
I see some interesting things that you've said about the FCAT. And all of this was contingent on FCAT scores, was it not, or greatly dependent on the FCAT scores? Interesting figures. In '96, we were spending $4.44 per student on the FCAT, and this has jumped to almost $20 per student. So we're spending a lot of this money to test, and it's really, I think, and I'm pretty sure you agree from what you said, that to rely so much on that one test is not a good idea. It kind of forces teachers to teach the test, and I think a lot of people recognize this. A lot of voters will recognize that your position on this is more reasonable and more favorable to local control and neighborhood schools.
Yes, and I support teacher accountability, as I've stated. I think that, we need to have some type of merit-based pay for them. There is a plan in place now, but it can be improved. We certainly need an easier way to dismiss the teachers that are not performing up to standards. But as you said, Dave, and I agree with this, I mean, it's my statement, basing that performance evaluation solely on one test is wrong. I mean, a child can show up without breakfast that morning and do poorly on that test, and that affects the performance and compensation, ultimately compensation for that teacher for the entire year. And, what if students decide that they just don't like the personality of a teacher, and they're going to tank the FCAT so that teacher doesn't get any compensation for the next year? So there are a lot of things that can be manipulated. And I'm going to point out another thing, too, that ties back in what we talked about just a moment ago. Through May of 2009, my opponent was a paid lobbyist for a company called Educational Testing Services. He resigned in May 2009 in order to run for the Senate. And you'll see the type of bill we got from my opponent in the last Senate session. It was a bill to increase testing in our schools. And I don't think that's a coincidence.
So legislation that he spearheaded would have benefited supporters of his directly. So that's where special interests come into play. And if you think it's only experience and tenure in government that counts, I think you're wrong, because, and I'm speaking to the listeners right now, we do need new blood in government. We need new people with new ideas, and try to break up some of the stranglehold that special interests have on the government and our legislation. Now, I was going to ask about public and private schools. So, these vouchers. I think we have pilot programs for vouchers primarily, but they tend to expand and expand. Are you in favor of those, or maybe those can coexist with our public school funding? How do you feel about that?
I think it's important for there to be some competition for our public schools. I think that is helpful. When you look at the overall situation of vouchers, they're called scholarships here in the state of Florida. I think it's a good situation if you are able to get children from a very poor school who otherwise don't have the means to attend a private school. because of financial reasons. I